Welcome everyone back to the Carmys. This is the third and final week of our very own Motorsports Awards show, and it's the fifth of six of the awards, technically awards, that I'm going to be handing out. And now we're going to be doing the part that I think I'm most excited for. Top 5 best and worst races. Technically though, they're separated in the fifth and sixth, because today we're going to be doing the top 5 best races of the 2025 season. I think you can already tell, it's all NASCAR related. So, I mentioned before, but I watched every single race from the top 3 series, from NASCAR Cup Series all the way down to the Truck Series, and both ARCA Super Speedway races. I don't know if that is something I should be proud of or makes me look like a fucking idiot, but it's kind of like this. So, I've rated them, I have officially scaled that race every race. 10 out of 10, or basically a 10. It's been possible, almost impossible to get a 10, but 9 to 9.9 are some of the greatest races in series history. That's just how it is. A 10 out of 10, there's only one race that gets a 10 out of 10, and that's the 2000 Winston 500, because it's the greatest NASCAR race of all time. A 10 out of 10 is for the greatest race of all time. 8 to 9 is very great race. It is a great race. Like, there's just, well, that's that. It's a great race. 7 to 7.9 is a good race. It's a good race. Nothing standing out, but a good race. 6 to 6.9, mid to very mediocre. There are a lot of races under this instance. So scoring a 6, would be kind of, kind of that range. Then a 5 to 5.9 is not good. Like, it's not a good race. Like, it's simply not a good race. 4 to 4.9, bad race. It's just a bad race. It's just that bad race. 3 to 3.9, a pretty horrendous atrocity type of race. Like, ultra bad. 2 to 2.9, worst race of the year contender. Far none. Like, that is a worst race of the year contender. Far none. Like, you can't get that. 1 to 1.9, worst race of the year, easy. There are not many races that get below a 2. Like, that is something very difficult to do. Like, if you get a below a 2, that's very difficult. But if you get somehow worse, 0 to 0.9, worst races in NASCAR history. I think there are a total of only 4 races ever ran in this entire damn sport that are below a 1. Because the 2008 Brickyard 400 is a 1. I gave it a 1, but there are races that are worse than that. And I will just say it right now. So that's kind of the rating on a scale. To give kind of a scale. So with that, let's get to the top 5 best races of 2025. Before that, let's get to honorable mentions. The best Truck Series race of 2025, because none made it into the top 5 list, was the Homestead race. Again, you'll see the actual name of the race at the bottom left corner of the screen for each entrance. This race overall is kind of a fun vibe, and also with it being drivers only broadcast, it's probably the most enjoyable one to listen to. I know Logano was kind of insufferable throughout most of the broadcasts he was on, and Harvick was, he's Kevin Harvick. Tries his best, I guess, but is the best. Keselowski, adds something, but at least you weren't listening to Jamie Little and Michael Waltrip, or maybe Regan Smith. Regan Smith, I guess, was okay throughout it, but, Jamie Little was pretty horrendous. So anything you don't have to listen to Jamie Little is automatically already going to get some help. But this race definitely was pretty good. There are a lot of lines actually being used, something that was happening unlike the Cup Series race. Especially in long runs. There were long runs, and there was, actual good racing, which, for the Truck Series, you would think that wasn't, possible. But 2025 did showcase so that the Truck Series did, at the first half of the year, kind of actually looked pretty good. But then the second half kind of also slowly collapsed. But this race kind of showcased that there was a time where the Truck Series was actually the best of the 3 series. Corey Adam led a lot of the laps, but his truck kept failing him toward the end of the race. And then, out of nowhere, Kyle Larson comes back from issues he suffered earlier in the race and goes on past his lane rigs with 2 laps to go and goes on to win. I know technically it is leeching win, but the kicker is Larson did not even have the best truck. Hine did. And, Larson did actually have to legitimately fight for it. There was a few races that didn't happen. Our second and last honorable mention is the best Xfinity race of 2025. No Xfinity races made on this list. And honestly, that shouldn't be really that surprising. This Xfinity Series season was probably one of the worst I've ever seen. I'll talk a little more about this during my worst races, because there's definitely going to be a few making it to my worst races. The best race of the 2025 Xfinity Series season was the Daytona night race. Was that technically both races are Daytona night, but it's the summer Daytona race. This race, despite the rain delay, and despite the red flags, because honest to God, if this race had not dealt with the red flags and the rain delays, I think there was a chance this race could have been a contender to even make it on this list of top 5. With the rain delays and a few other issues, kept it off this list. There were definitely plenty of chaos. There was wrecking going on, definitely. Weird happenings with, I think it was Harrison Burton had some weird shit going to his eye and arm. Cautions, NASCAR was not very trigger happy with the cautions, which was kind of good at times. You had Ryan Seat nearly get airborne. Actually, he did get airborne. He almost flipped over. And then, Leland Hyman could have played the ultimate spoiler, and then the big bitch got him out of line. And then guess what? The big bitch got left out of line, threw a whole ass tantrum on the final lap, and wrecked pretty much the rest of the back, like 2/3 of the field. But what made this race really special was cars alleged this was following Watkins Glen. He had to get out of his car. Parker Kligerman took over it. Parker Kligerman drove to take the win, which unironic vindication was, I think, what you kind of thought. And I think everybody universally was happy Parker won that race, whether or not it didn't count, because it technically wasn't going to count because he relieved Zillage, but Parker did a lot of the work. And, his JRM teammates of Allgaier and Sammy Smith also helped him out a lot as well in blocking the rest behind. But man, that was a special, just seeing the win, the celebration as well, just all around a special moment. Now that we got our honorable mentions out of the way, let's finally get to our top 5 best races of 2025. Number 5 on this list is the 2025 Hollywood Casinos 400 presented by the ESPYs at Kansas Motor Speedway. This was the fall race at Kansas, a race that I titled on my, race ratings, Unreal. And that's kind of how you get it, because an overall race, the actual race itself, it was solid. There was definitely dirty air for sure, like the Next Gen usually produces. Before Next Gen race, we even involved in dirty air, it was solid. There was movements and stuff, there was some level strategy, and the racing overall wasn't bad. I would say it's around 7s to 8s range, but the final part of that race, man, that got out of control. With, a lot of, they were wrecking a lot, but it definitely turned lots of chaos with the big one, Hosabar, have another tantrum. And then, we get to overtime. Bubba Wallace is trying to pull off, I think, minus 27 points, trying to, win, you're in type of deal. He's behind Christopher Bell. He gets up high, he gets Bell up high, and it's stomach clean. It's not the most clean racing, but, it's fair. Then caution comes out, cut back, and Zane Smith's on riding the wall on his side, KZK Martin Truex Jr. style. Probably the most ridiculous camera cut of the year. Like, you just cut from racing to a car on its side, and then it rolls over. It was just a crazy cut. Then that final restart. 5 Toyotas to win. Get out of control. The whole thing starts losing control of the final lap. Briscoe gets the wall. Ackland gets underneath his own car and runs and bangs up the wall because it gets so damn tight, dick sucking each other. And then out of nowhere, from 10 to the win, Claytis gets to his inside and, just runs through it to take the win. Like, Chase Elliott came from 10th to the win in 2 laps in a ride that I think could make Dale Earnhardt even shake in his boots just a little. That was one of these drives, like, truly one of the restarts that one of the best restarts ever, because he just sliced through the field. He was up to 5th on the final lap and then cut through it again. Turn 4, gets by, and pulls off an unbelievable win. Like, it was actually probably one of the craziest finishes of the year. Number 4 is the 2025 Coca-Cola 600. It's, the longest race of the year, obviously. And I think, unironically, this Coca-Cola 600 might actually be the best. It is. I think this Coca-Cola 600, unironically, the 2025, was probably the best Coca-Cola 600 of the Next Gen era. I know a lot of people are going to be mouth hanging open, despite all the dirty air issues that, usually follows the Next Gen, because most of the intermediate races, you have dirty air falling, and this was definitely occasion with this race, but if they are meat races, this was definitely the best, and a race that NASCAR definitely needed, because especially after the Kansas Spring race, it just, morale was pretty low in the community. Like, just overall, just thinking, wow, if the Coco 600 is actually bad, we are maybe witnessing one of the lowest seasons in NASCAR history. Coco 600 kind of somewhat got the season, turning around a little bit, not to mention Prime, and Prime knocked the shit out the park. Like, they knocked the broadcast out of the park. I'm not a big fan for paying for streaming on anything. But in this, they knocked it out of the park. The broadcast was, there was actual pre-race, there was actual talk, and there was legit, and I think, Carl Edwards, just having Carl Edwards there made the vibe just so much better in anything. The racing overall, it just, even though it is long and following a very lackluster Indy 500, because you have to admit the Indy 500 this year, the second half especially, was very lackluster. This race was far and away the best. Like, it wasn't even close. It was the best of the greatest day in racing, which probably will maybe be the true last greatest day in racing. I know Formula One's going to be still running, but they're not going to run the Canadian Grand Prix against the Indy 500, which I think is a stupid-ass move, but I'm getting off track. This race, the racing was solid enough, but it was kind of a slow burn type, like the slow burn race that you get, and it slowly builds. The storyline of the day ends up becoming Ross Chastain coming from last to friggin' first for the win. With help, from a little bit of Dirty Air as well, assistance from Dirty Air, and get through it. Chastain was flying through that last part of the race. He made up, I think, 3 seconds in about 20 laps. Got to Byron, and the battle was definitely intense. Got toward it, and got to Byron's side, and was able to, with help from other lap traffic, so just scooting from him, get him in just enough Dirty Air, got around, and got away for the win. It was definitely an intense battle, and for a time, this was actually the best race of the year. For probably about almost, I'll tell you about a month, but the race ended up getting a 9.2. Number 3, the 2025 Coke Zero Sugar 400. This race may be the most intense race of 2025. I think it is actually probably the most intense race. I don't know. There might be another race on this list I might talk about, but this race kind of seemed like it was going to be, kind of a massive chaos filter, like 2024, whenever Tyler Reddick and Todd Gilliland crashed in the inside wall. And then the big one struck where, Kyle Larson, proving world's greatest driver, bumps on Wallace, causes a massive pileup in the tri-oval, and taking out Alex Bowman, basically meaning that now, basically, I think Alex Bowman's, kind of how they make it in is kind of out of their control. And the racing for the rest part actually, was very, pretty damn good. There was, some slow moments, but overall it was probably the best, of the 2.5 mile super races. It was the best one of the year. But then toward the, end of the race, the intensity was just building. And I know I wasn't the only one was thinking with 2 laps to go on the final lap, they were going to have, wad it up, somehow they were going to get some water in turn 1. They were going to go 2022 style. The whole damn field just nuking it in the corner. No, I just thought that was going to happen. It didn't. And then someone made it to the end. And basically what was basically a 4-wide finish, Ryan Blaney managed to come from, I think, 10th to the win in 3 laps surrounded by cars that needed wins to get in. Suarez, Custer, Haley, and I think Buescher as well. They all were there, but in the end, Ryan Blaney saved Alex Bowman for 3 weeks to have a chance to run for the championship, only for Bowman to fall out afterwards. But it was a wild run and definitely chaotic end. The race ended up scoring also a 9.2. The number 2 race on this list is the Bristol Night Race. This race was one that kind of came out of nowhere. This was probably the most surprising race here because the expectations was bottom of the barrel. Everybody thought this was going to be a shittiest race of the year could do. Worst race overall of the year. And overall, I kind of, somewhat understand that. But I was somewhat hopeful that maybe something could happen. But man, I don't think anybody expected this. Early on, it was kind of going into his normal Bristol style. But then AJ started dropping tires. Then another car started driving tires. Then the marbles started getting discovered. Then everybody started losing pace massively. Then it became apparent the 2024 Food City 500 was back again. Tires 2 was here. And tires became the name of the game. In fact, the tire buildup became such an issue, though, that, at one point, fire started becoming an issue with buildup. In fact, Josh Berry had his season basically end with this, and Austin Cindric and his entire crew of buffoon heads nearly killed their own season because they just fucking stood there and let the car burn, not even dare try to put it out. They were lucky Alex Bowman had struggled at Darlington beforehand with a bad pit stop, because if Bowman had even had some level of a decent run at Darlington, the two team would have been out. They did not deserve to get past the round of 12, because round of 16 rather, not round of 12, round of 16 for that shit right there. But outside of, that little tangent, the racing was very chaotic. There was a lot of cautions, but it was just kind of out of control. The tire degradation made, tire, you were just waiting for who was going to be next, because it wasn't always, it was like Bristol where the moment tires, everyone started losing tires, they would immediately spin just because, they just had literally no tread, they just cored the tire so bad, they just spin. They were actually able to get to it, and we were actually able to get, some long green flag runs at times before, we had cautions. We did get strings of cautions at times, but it was a very, it was a very good, chaotic-filled night, and it ended with a wild restart where Hocebar and Zane Smith admitted they're with dick sucking each other off, allowed Christopher Bell and Brad Keselowski to continue and pull away, and in the end, it ended with Brad trying and failing to do a bump and run, because Brad sent it. All I did was the bump rear end, boom. Didn't do much to Bell, because again, these actions, you can't do that. You could somewhat do it with a C with a COT or a Gen 6 somewhat, but you cannot do it with an action, and you probably, though, not nearly as much as a Gen 4. Even with that, this race got a 9.3 out of 10, and I rated was the second race. Here's the thing, though. The 9.3 actually tied with the number 1 race on this list as the best race of the year. But I just rated this other race that's number 1 just higher, thinking it was the best race of the year. And I do think this is the best race of the year. Number 1, the summer race at Echo Park Speedway. It's Atlanta Motor Speedway. It's just called Echo Park Speedway thanks to selling their name off, which I don't like the Echo Park Speedway. But it is Atlanta Super Speedway, and this was the best race of the year. For the second year in a row, Atlanta Super Speedway wins the best race of the year. I had the spring race from 2024 as my best race of 2024. Last year. This year, it's the summer race. And while I don't think this race was quite, as wild and, just overall just kind of, incredible in terms of just storyline stuff, this was still a very good, in terms of entertainment, this was probably the most entertaining race of the year. Even following the massive ass big one, the huge one that involved 26 cars, the race was very entertaining. There was kind of an old school style, early 2000s IRL style race where, you could actually get runs and, you could also be the leader and you were in clean air. You still somewhat had an advantage, but you didn't have an overall advantage like in other intermediates. And you could get run and you could actually get help from behind where you could actually push. There wasn't a whole lot of fuel saving because there was not many cars in the pack. And those incidents after the huge one were single car, 2-car incidents. They were not, big accidents. So most of the field kept intact. But the intensity, this was another race that was ultra intense. And even that stage 2 finish, wild. I think it was 1/1000th of a second was the difference between Reddick and Elliott. And that was just a staging. Racing all the way to the end of the race, so chaos filled, but man, it was just you got a special feeling. You were just kind of building. You kind of had a feeling something was gonna happen. Basically there was almost no team help outside of the RFK cars of Brad Keselowski and Chris Buescher and Chase Elliott now as well, which Elliott and Bowman were not really helping each other that much throughout the race till kind of toward the very end. Had to run, it was all just building. You're trying to get in position, coming to the white flag. You can tell Elliott's laying off, and then he gets a run with help from Bowman, shoots in, and Brad pretty much did as much as he humanly could, blocked without pretty much causing an accident. But Elliott just got to him too fast. Cleus gets by, inside, back straight away, turns her in for Bowman, gets side by side, holds Kozlowski off like a white knight, off turn 4, Chase Elliott wins again in his hometown track. Yeah, truly, like in a race, I think we knew how it was going to be a race of the year contender. And this truly was like a special race, because when watching, you get that type of intensity feeling, and you really are getting vibes of, you know, an old school, like if you love like the old IRL, like IndyCar days, or like the 2000s, that's what you get here. And I like those early 2000 IRL races a lot more than most of the current IndyCar product, even now, or most racing. Like that was some of my personal favorite racing ever. And this racing, I love the style of racing, you know. It's probably the only track. It's probably why Atlanta is actually the best track in the sport, and one of the only tracks is because, you know, the next gen works here. You know, most of the tracks, the next gen doesn't really work well at all, you know, because of the dirty air and stuff for the diffuser. Because here, though, the diffuser actually does not cause enough an issue, but you're gaining enough speed where you're able to stay kind of in the throttle, and, you know, you're just kind of, because there's still dirty air, but it's not, you know, as bad as per se where you lose pack, because the draft still helps you out somewhat. And that was kind of the deal with this race. And, you know, I'd recommend you go watch this race. If there's a race, if there are two races I'd watch, it's this and that Bristol night race. Those two races both got scored 9.3. It was very close. But this race, I think, edged out just a little bit more, because I think the race was just a little more enjoyable here. What do you guys think? Do you think I got the list right with top 5 best races of 2025 in the right order? Or do you think you have another race I should talk about as well? Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe for more. And that's going to do it. So, yeah, that's about it. See ya.